Let's turn our attention now to the newspapers. Diptyka Laurent joins us on set for that. And of course, Diptyka, a lot of reactions to those Iranian airstrikes on Iraqi bases that are home to US troops overnight.
That's right. First, let's show you, there's a great cartoon from the Algerian cartoonist Hik today. Pretty self-explanatory, but it does give you a good summary of the situation there. He depicts the fate of the world, and particularly the Middle East, as being in the hands of the US and Iran, who you see both locked here in a fierce arm wrestle, really telling illustration. It's a really telling illustration of the situation right now. Let's also show you the front page of Al-Akhbar there. That's a Lebanese paper which is close to the Iran-backed Hezbollah group. Al-Akhbar posting maps of American military bases in Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain and the Emirates on its front page today, rather jubilantly announcing that Iran has entered a new phase in which it is beginning to act on its threats. The paper also warning that these airstrikes are a turning point for the region, and with the US and Iran now locked in direct armed conflict, Al-Akhbar announcing the, quote, beginning of the battle for liberation, in this case alluding to the liberation of the Middle East. There's also a really interesting article from the Jerusalem Post today, Eve, that notes that all of these Iranian airstrikes are really a departure in strategy. Iran usually favors ambiguity. I quote, it likes recruiting proxies like Hezbollah or the Houthis in Yemen so it can have plausible deniability. In this case, the writer says Iran knows it doesn't have the Air Force or Navy to confront the US, both of whom aren't really looking for a war right now.
Saying they're not looking for war, but of course everybody looking at where things may in fact go from here.
Because it does indeed look like a war, at least from just looking at the events of the past couple of days. The US President Donald Trump posted an exclamation-filled tweet earlier declaring that all is well. But in this piece today, the Wall Street Journal notes that history teaches us that, quote, many armed confrontations begin by inadvertence, not by design. Given this is an election year and Donald Trump has explicitly said he doesn't want a war, Iran could force his hand, for instance, by staging a spectacular attack against Americans. That's what this Wall Street Journal article argues. And that's a big risk looking at the situation right now. In any case, the New York Times columnist Frank Bruni says Donald Trump lacks the credibility to lead the U.S. into any war. I quote, Donald Trump is a, quote, inexperienced, impulsive and perpetually aggrieved commander-in-chief, precisely one that the U.S. cannot afford right now.
Indeed, and this tit for tat, the conflict being played out also on social media.
That's right. After that airstrike that killed the Iranian General Soleimani, Donald Trump mocked the Iranians by posting a picture of the U.S. flag onto his account. Well, after the Iranian airstrikes on those bases, Iranian officials have taken to trolling Trump on Twitter by posting a picture of the Iranian flag on Twitter, as you see here from this article here.
Copying, Trump's from earlier. But some people are looking at it and saying that maybe the retaliation that we have seen by Iran, these airstrikes in response to the killing of their general, that might now be enough to quell the tensions.
Well, this is a really interesting article from The Guardian today that explains why they've come to that conclusion. Basically, they note that the Iranian airstrikes were heavy on symbolism. Even the timing of the airstrikes coincided with the time of the strike on General Soleimani. Iranians, as we mentioned, were posting pictures of the Iranian flag on Twitter, just like Donald Trump did. But The Guardian says the attacks itself appear to have been, quote, carefully calibrated to avoid U.S. casualties. Those two bases targeted were already on high alert. In this case, in this regard, The Guardian says the strikes might be an opportunity for Iran to say it got revenge, for the U.S. to take a step back, basically both sides being able to, quote, de-escalate without losing face.
Well, in any case, the hashtag No War with Iran has been reappearing in light of those latest attacks.
Yeah, and actually this whole situation has sparked a lot of condemnation from U.S. lawmakers. This tweet from Ilhan Omar urging the calming of tensions. Lives will be lost, innocent lives will be lost, and the future generations will be impacted if a war breaks out. Win Without War, that's a advocacy coalition out of Washington that actually formed back in 2002. II before the Iraq war in the early 2000s. The group put out a statement today calling for all parties to immediately de-escalate tensions and, quote, reject an unnecessary and costly war of choice. So we see really from a civilian point of view, people absolutely don't want war. And in fact, tomorrow across the U.S., this group and other progressive groups are planning dozens of anti-war marches calling on Donald Trump to take a step back.
Indeed, and of course we're expecting to hear directly from the US President Donald Trump later this Wednesday. Diptyque Laurent, thanks a lot for that review of the papers. Well, a quick break now, but still to come, our Focus Report will be looking at the ongoing debate over what exactly happened in Poland during World War II. Some stories about Nazi concentration camps that are in fact thought to be untrue. Gulliver Cragg will be explaining all in the next half hour of the show.